Let me tell you about the moment I discovered my wife, Samantha, was cheating on me. It's one of those things you think only happens to other people until it happens to you. We'd been together for over a decade, married for almost 10 years, and I honestly believed we were solid. Sure, we had our ups and downs like anyone, but nothing that made me think we were in trouble. And that's the thing, you never see it coming. It started when my best friend, James, reached out one evening out of the blue. He asked if I wanted to grab a drink, which wasn't unusual, but I could tell something was off in his voice. James and I have been friends forever, so I can usually read him pretty well. We met at this quiet bar, and after some small talk and a couple of drinks, he got serious. "I need to tell you something, man, and it's bad," he said, staring at his beer like it held the answers he was looking for. I braced myself, already uneasy. He hesitated at first, clearly not wanting to be the one to blow up my world, but eventually he came out with it. He said he'd seen Samantha at a restaurant. Harmless enough, right? Except she wasn't alone. She was with another guy, and James said it didn't look innocent. Then he hit me with the worst part. He saw them kiss. Not a friendly, casual kind of kiss, but something much more. The way he described it made it clear this wasn't something innocent. I can't even explain how I felt when he told me that. It was like someone punched me in the chest, knocking the air out of me. My first thought was denial. I wanted to believe it wasn't true, that James must have misread the situation. Samantha would never do that to me. But at the same time, there was this sinking feeling in my stomach that told me James wasn't lying. He wouldn't do that to me. Anger, confusion, and disbelief hit me all at once. How could this be happening? Samantha and I had built a life together, and now I was supposed to believe she was sneaking around with someone else? How long had this been going on? Was it a one-time thing, or had I been blind for who knows how long? I couldn't stop replaying every recent moment in my head, trying to figure out if there were signs I'd missed. Every little smile, every kiss, every time she came home late. It all started to feel suspicious. But I didn't want to act impulsively. I knew better than to just confront her without a plan. I wanted to take my time to think things through. If this was going to blow up, I wanted to make sure I was prepared. The anger was there, for sure, and I started fantasizing about how I could make her regret this. But honestly, I didn't know how to handle it in a way that would actually make me feel better. The days that followed were unbearable. Pretending everything was fine while I was falling apart inside was brutal. Every time she smiled or laughed, I wanted to scream. I couldn't look at her without imagining her with that guy. And the worst part? She had no idea I knew. She carried on like everything was normal, like she wasn't living a lie every day. And yet, I couldn't turn off my feelings for her. As much as I hated what she'd done, part of me still loved her. Or maybe I just didn't want to believe it was true. I kept hoping James was wrong, that maybe he'd misunderstood what he saw. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I just wasn't ready to face it yet. About a week after James's revelation, Samantha hit me with a bombshell of her own. We were having dinner, just the two of us, when out of nowhere, she started talking about open relationships. I nearly choked on my food. Seriously? We'd been married for almost 10 years. And she decided now was the time to bring this up? At first, I thought she was joking, maybe trying to be provocative or edgy. But no, she was completely serious. She launched into this whole spiel about how modern couples were exploring open marriages and how it could be refreshing for us. Refreshing? The woman was out there screwing another guy behind my back. And now she wanted my permission to keep doing it? The sheer audacity of it floored me. It didn't take long to see what she was up to. This was her way of justifying her affair, of spinning it so she could have everything she wanted without the guilt. She wasn't satisfied with just cheating. She wanted me to be okay with it. She thought I'd be stupid or weak enough to agree. It made my stomach turn. The manipulation was almost impressive in a twisted way. Instead of admitting she'd been sneaking around, she tried to reframe it as some progressive, forward-thinking idea. What a joke. I wanted to lose it. I wanted to flip the table and tell her right then and there that I knew everything. But I didn't. I clenched my jaw, swallowed my anger, and forced myself to stay calm. I even played along. I told her I thought it was a great idea, Yeah, I actually said that. The flicker of surprise on her face was priceless, but she recovered quickly, smiling like she'd just won the lottery. In that moment, I knew exactly what I was going to do. By pretending to agree to her little open relationship scheme, I bought myself time to plan my next move. This wasn't just about confronting her. I wanted her to feel the same gut-wrenching pain she'd put me through. And trust me, I already had some ideas forming. But I'd keep those to myself for now. All I had to do was play the role of the understanding, progressive husband while secretly setting the stage for my revenge. She had no clue what was coming. She thought she'd manipulated me, that she had me wrapped around her finger. But if there's one thing I've learned about people like Samantha, it's that they always think they're the smartest person in the room, right up until they aren't. After I agreed to her ridiculous open relationship idea, I knew I had the upper hand. It wasn't a matter of if I was going to get even. It was about how. Catching her cheating and walking away wasn't enough. I wanted her to feel every ounce of betrayal she'd dumped on me. That's when I started putting my plan together. And the first step? Olivia. Olivia had been Samantha's best friend for years. They were practically joined at the hip, the type who shared everything. If Samantha so much as sneezed, Olivia probably heard about it 5 minutes later. But here's the twist. Samantha hadn't told Olivia about her affair. I'm guessing it was because of shame or maybe to avoid admitting she was doing the exact thing she once condemned when it happened to one of their friends. Whatever the reason, this gap in their friendship was my opportunity, and I planned to take full advantage of it. I decided to reach out to Olivia, spinning some story about needing her advice on Samantha's open relationship idea. She didn't hesitate to meet up, probably thinking she'd be playing the role of therapist, helping me come to terms with letting my wife sleep with other men. Yeah, that wasn't happening. We met at this cozy little cafe, the kind of place that feels intimate but not too crowded, just right for the conversation I was about to steer. Olivia was eager to dive into the topic, and I kept things light at first, asking about her and Samantha's friendship, pretending to be open-minded. Then, I casually brought up Samantha's idea about spicing up our marriage, framing it as though I was genuinely trying to understand this new dynamic. I'm not going to lie, I said, leaning back in my chair with a sigh. The whole open relationship thing, it's not exactly something I ever thought I'd be talking about. But I guess, in a way, Samantha's right. Maybe it's time to explore something new. Olivia's eyes widened in surprise. She looked intrigued, like she was trying to process this unexpected side of me. Well, yeah, Samantha has mentioned that she thinks couples who experiment are healthier in the long run, Olivia said, taking a sip of her latte. She really thinks this could be refreshing? Exactly, I agreed, nodding as if I were a progressive husband fully embracing this new idea. I could feel the shift in the air. Olivia was warming up to the idea, and I knew this was my moment. Actually, Samantha had an idea, I said, lowering my voice just enough to make it sound more personal. She suggested, well, since we're friends, that maybe you and I could, explore something together. Olivia almost choked on her coffee. For a split second, she looked like she couldn't decide whether to be horrified or intrigued. Clearly, the idea of crossing that line had never even occurred to her. Wait, what? She asked, trying to laugh it off, but I could see the curiosity creeping in. You're telling me Samantha suggested that you and I? Yeah, I said, leaning in just slightly. Look, I know it sounds crazy, but isn't that the whole point of an open relationship? Trying new things with people you trust. I was laying it on thick and I knew it, but Olivia was already biting. I could see her wrestling with the idea, trying to justify it to herself, just like I knew she would. It wasn't the concept itself holding her back. It was the thrill of doing something forbidden. I don't know, Ethan. This seems... I don't think Samantha would be okay with it, she said, biting her lip and fidgeting with the edge of her coffee cup. Classic Olivia, always trying to do the right thing but unable to resist a little danger when it presented itself. Trust me, I said, keeping my tone steady and confident. Samantha suggested it. She wants us to explore, and she thought you and I being so close made sense as a starting point. I could see Olivia's defenses starting to crumble. She was curious and tempted but didn't want it to feel awkward. That's why I was playing it so casual. Maybe part of her thought it was too weird, but I was banking on another part, the one that liked the idea of stepping over the line. Let's be real, this wasn't about me. It was about the thrill, the excitement, the rush of doing something she never thought she'd do. That was the real motivator here. We sat there for what felt like forever, the silence filled with her racing thoughts. Then I shifted the conversation, making it less abstract and more personal. I mean, come on, Olivia, I said with a slight smile. Haven't you ever wondered what it would be like? Just once. No strings, no pressure. Samantha wouldn't even have to know. I could see the internal conflict in her eyes, the struggle between what she thought was right and what she really wanted. After a little more flirting and a couple more drinks, the tension broke, and she gave in. Maybe just once, she said quietly, as though she couldn't believe she was actually agreeing to this. And that's when I knew I had her. With Olivia on board, I had the perfect weapon to destroy Samantha. This wasn't just revenge. This was the ultimate betrayal. Samantha's best friend was now part of the plan, and the fallout was going to be devastating. The best part? Samantha had no idea what was coming. I smiled at Olivia, thanked her for the chat, and walked out of the cafe knowing the stage was set. Samantha thought she had everything under control, but she was about to learn what happens when you push someone too far. And I was going to make sure it hit her where it hurt most. I smiled at Olivia, thanked her for the chat, and walked out of the cafe knowing I had just set the stage for my next move. Samantha thought she was clever, that she was playing me like a fool, but she was about to find out what happens when you push someone too far. Now, all I had to do was wait for the perfect moment to strike. And when that moment came, it was going to be glorious. With Olivia locked into my plan and the groundwork laid for Samantha's ultimate betrayal, it was time to deal with the other half of this mess. Her lover. There was no way I was letting him walk away without feeling the fallout of the chaos he'd helped create. He probably thought he was smart, sneaking around with another man's wife, thinking he'd never get caught. But he was about to learn what happens when you mess with the wrong husband. I brought James back into the loop. He'd already shown he had my back, and this next step required some finesse. James had connections, people who could find information others couldn't. At this point, I didn't even know the guy's name, but with a few phone calls, James tracked him down. We learned just enough to set the next phase of my plan in motion. We arranged a meeting with him, disguised as a casual, friendly chat. He had no idea what he was walking into. James made it seem like a simple catch-up, nothing suspicious, just a couple of guys grabbing drinks. When we arrived at the bar where the meeting was set, I immediately sized him up. He wasn't anything special, tall, fit, with that smug look of someone who thinks they're better than everyone else. I could see why Samantha went for him. He had that polished, charming exterior, but there was something about him that told me he'd crumble under real pressure. And that was exactly what I intended to do. We exchanged pleasantries, ordered drinks, and I let James take the lead, playing it cool. I wasn't about to tip him off. Not yet. This wasn't the time for a full-on confrontation. First, we needed to make him understand exactly what he'd gotten himself into. James, smooth as ever, started dropping hints. He didn't come out and accuse the guy outright, but he danced around the topic, mentioning little details that only someone involved would recognize. He casually brought up dates and talked about a certain restaurant where Samantha and this guy had been spotted. Each time, I saw the guy's posture shift. He sat a little stiffer, his movements more deliberate, like he was trying to control himself. He was starting to realize this wasn't just a friendly meetup. At one point, I noticed him glance at his phone, likely checking for a text from Samantha or planning his escape. That's when I decided it was time to speak up. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him for the first time in the conversation. "You know," I said, keeping my voice calm but heavy with intent, "there's a weird situation going on. Seems my wife has been getting a little too friendly with someone recently." His face went pale. He understood exactly what I was saying, but before he could deny it or come up with an excuse, I kept going. "Don't get me wrong," I said, letting the tension build. "I'm not here to cause a scene. That's not really my style." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle in. But there's something you need to know. I'm aware of an upcoming date you've got planned with her. A little rendezvous. That's not going to happen. He blinked, clearly caught off guard. What are you talking about? He asked, his voice shaky despite his attempt to sound casual. He was nervous, and it showed. James stepped in at that point, his tone casual but laced with menace. We're not asking, he said, leaning back in his chair with a relaxed yet dangerous demeanor. We're telling you, cancel that date and stop answering her calls. If you don't, things are going to get very uncomfortable for you. And trust me, you don't want that. The guy fumbled for his drink, his hands visibly shaking as he tried to steady himself. It was almost laughable how quickly his confident act fell apart. He knew we weren't bluffing, and the realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He was trying to figure out his options, but let's be real, he didn't have any. His only choice was to back off and pray I didn't push this any further. For a few long, tense moments, he didn't say a word. He just sat there, frozen like a deer in the headlights. Then, finally, he nodded. Yeah, all right, he muttered, his discomfort painfully obvious. I won't show up. I won't answer her anymore. I could see the panic in his eyes. He wasn't just afraid of me and James. He was starting to grasp just how deep he was in this mess. The fear of what else I might do was eating away at him. He had no idea how far I was willing to go, and I could see that uncertainty gnawing at him. Perfect, I said, my voice steady, letting the weight of the moment sink in. James and I exchanged a quick glance, satisfied that we'd gotten what we came for. The guy bolted out of the bar not long after, practically tripping over himself on the way out. Watching him scramble to leave, I felt a sharp sense of satisfaction. Samantha had no clue that her fantasy world was starting to crumble. I could already picture her sitting there, waiting for him to show up, completely blindsided by his absence. As we finished our drinks, James chuckled, shaking his head. Man, did you see his face? He looked like he was going to piss himself. I couldn't help but laugh too, though there was still a heaviness in my chest. This was just the first step. Confronting the guy felt good. Sure, but it wasn't enough. Not by a long shot. Samantha wasn't going to walk away from this unscathed. This was only the beginning. On the drive home, my mind raced with thoughts of what came next. The revenge, the fallout, everything I'd been planning. It all felt so close, almost tangible. But for now, knowing her lover was out of the picture was a small but satisfying victory. She'd be sitting there, waiting and wondering, and I couldn't wait to see her frustration build. Maybe she'd start doubting him. Maybe she'd even start doubting herself. The irony was almost too perfect. But this was just the start of what I had in store for her. Now it was time to focus entirely on Samantha. I could already see her confusion, her frustration growing when her lover didn't show up. She'd have no idea why, and the suspense alone would be enough to start unraveling her carefully crafted facade. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. What came next would completely dismantle her world, piece by piece. I'll never forget the night everything finally came crashing down. It was the moment I'd been waiting for, planning for, over weeks. Honestly, I hadn't felt this kind of anticipation in a long time. Samantha, blissfully unaware of the storm heading her way, had gone out for her date, thinking it was just another evening with her lover. She probably thought she was pulling off her little game flawlessly, acting as though her fake open relationship was something I'd fallen for. What she didn't know, of course, was that her boyfriend wasn't showing up. He was probably still too shaken from our talk to even consider going through with it. Meanwhile, I had my own plans for the night. I wasn't going to sit around sulking while she cheated on me again. No, I was done playing the passive, clueless husband. The stage was set and everything was in place. After sending Samantha off with a half-hearted kiss and a phony smile, I called Olivia over. She came over completely clueless about what was about to happen. In her mind, this was just a night of fun under the open relationship idea Samantha had pitched. I could tell Olivia was still a little hesitant, unsure about the whole situation, but that uncertainty faded quickly once the wine started flowing. I made sure everything was perfect, Candles lit, soft music playing in the background. The setup was romantic and intimate, the kind of atmosphere Samantha probably thought belonged solely to our marriage. But tonight it was for me and Olivia. We talked, laughed, drank more wine, and soon the conversation started dipping into more personal territory. The tension between us grew thicker, and I knew Olivia was just waiting for me to make the first move. So I did. Things escalated fast. One minute we were sitting on the couch, chatting about nothing important, and the next we were tangled up in each other like teenagers sneaking around at a party. Clothes hit the floor, boundaries disappeared, and we ended up in bed. But this wasn't about Olivia, not really. It never was. This was about Samantha. This was about showing her that she wasn't the only one who could cross the line, about taking something she valued and using it to show her what betrayal felt like. And wouldn't you know it? Right in the middle of everything, I heard the front door open. Samantha had come home earlier than I'd expected, probably because her little rendezvous with lover boy had fallen apart. The sound of the door clicking shut, followed by the sharp echo of her heels on the hardwood floor, told me she was already inside. Strangely, I didn't feel panicked. No rush to cover anything up. No guilt. I wanted her to see this. I wanted her to feel the sting of betrayal as sharply as I had. Then it happened. The bedroom door flew open, and there she was, standing in the doorway. Her face twisted into an expression I'll never forget. A mix of shock, disgust, and unfiltered rage. Her mouth hung open, her eyes wide with disbelief. I could almost hear the wheels turning in her head as she tried to process what she was seeing. She had never imagined, not in a million years, that I'd be capable of something like this. But there I was, in bed with her best friend. "What the?" she screamed, her voice shaking the walls. Olivia, completely blindsided, scrambled out of the bed, fumbling for her clothes in a panic. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Samantha, I didn't. I'm so sorry," Olivia stammered, unable to even meet Samantha's gaze. Before Samantha could respond, Olivia bolted from the room, clutching her clothes and practically tripping over herself on the way out. The door slammed behind her, leaving me and Samantha alone to face off, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. For a moment, there was a deafening silence. It was the kind of silence that hangs in the air right before a storm breaks. And then the storm hit. "You disgusting piece of..." Samantha yelled, stepping toward me with her fists clenched. Her eyes burned with rage, the same fire I used to love seeing in her, but now it was aimed directly at me. "You, my best friend, in our bed? How dare you? You hypocrite!" I couldn't help but laugh. The hypocrisy of it all was almost too much. The way she stood there, acting like she had any moral high ground to stand on. As if she hadn't been sneaking around with someone else, pretending everything at home was just fine. I got out of bed, not even bothering to cover myself. I wanted her to feel the weight of this moment. "Hypocrite? Are you serious right now, Samantha?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You've been screwing some other guy behind my back for weeks, and you think I'm the bad guy here? That's different," she screamed, her face red with anger. "We agreed to an open relationship, Ethan. You crossed the line. Olivia's my best friend." I couldn't help it. I burst out laughing. The absurdity of it all was too much. "An open relationship?" I scoffed. "That's rich, Samantha. Don't even try to play the victim here. I know about the affair. I've known for weeks. You really think I didn't see this coming? You think I didn't know exactly what you were doing?" Her face froze for a moment, her eyes wide as she realized I'd been onto her all along. "Wait, what?" she muttered, her voice suddenly quiet and shaky. "You knew." "Of course, I knew," I snapped, stepping closer to her as my anger finally boiled over. "James saw you with him. I knew when you came home smelling like his cologne. And then you had the nerve to pitch the whole open relationship idea, thinking I'd just fall for it? You've been lying to me this entire time, Samantha, and now you want to act like I'm the one in the wrong." Her face contorted in fury, but beneath the rage, I could see it, fear. She wasn't in control anymore, and it terrified her. You bastard, she spat, her voice trembling with anger and humiliation. You planned this, didn't you? The whole thing. I nodded, not even bothering to hide the satisfaction in my voice. You're damn right I did. You think you can cheat on me, treat me like an idiot and get away with it?
No, Samantha.
This is your mess. You made this bed, and now you're going to lie in it, alone. Her expression crumpled, and for the first time I saw something I hadn't expected, vulnerability. But it was far too late for that. Too late for apologies. Too late for tears. We were far past the point of no return. She let out a final scream of frustration, a guttural, raw sound before storming out of the room, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I stood there for a moment, my chest heaving, my mind racing. This was supposed to feel like victory, but instead, all I felt was emptiness. I'd gotten my revenge, sure, but at what cost? My marriage was in ruins, my life burned to the ground, and all that was left were the ashes. After the chaos of the confrontation had settled, I knew what had to come next. There was no fixing this.
No rebuilding.
Samantha and I were beyond repair. While she was still fuming over catching me with Olivia, I calmly told her the words I'd been waiting weeks to say. I'm filing for divorce. I expected her to explode again, to scream and throw something at me, anything to regain control. But for the first time that night, she just stood there, stunned. It was like she couldn't process what I'd just said. I guess it hadn't occurred to her that I might actually leave. Maybe she thought I'd be the one begging for forgiveness, trying to salvage what we had. But no, the moment she betrayed me, it was over. I'd just been waiting for the right moment to end it. You can't be serious, she finally said, her voice shaking, tinged with desperation. Ethan, come on. Don't do this. We can work through this. The open relationship thing was supposed to help us, not ruin everything. I laughed again, shaking my head. She still didn't get it. She still couldn't see that this open relationship nonsense was just a convenient excuse for her selfishness. It wasn't about fixing us. It was about justifying her lies, dressing them up as something modern and progressive when they were nothing but betrayal wrapped in a buzzword. Help us, I said, my voice steady but sharp. Samantha, let's stop pretending. You didn't want an open relationship to help us. You wanted it so you could keep screwing around and feel good about yourself while doing it. You thought I'd be dumb enough to fall for your little act. But the truth is, I've known for weeks about you and your lover. Hell, even James knew. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, real fear flashed across her face. She understood now that this wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment outburst. She knew I had been biding my time, watching and planning. Her mouth opened, probably to launch into some excuse or explanation, but I cut her off before she could even start. Don't even try to spin this as some noble attempt to spice up our marriage, I said, shaking my head. You lied, cheated, and then tried to dress it up as something progressive when you got caught. It's pathetic, Samantha. And now, it's over. She stepped toward me, her hands trembling, desperation written all over her face. I made a mistake, okay? We both made mistakes. But we can fix this. I can fix this. We don't have to throw everything away. The rage boiled up inside me again, but I pushed it down. I had spent enough time being angry. This wasn't about rage anymore, it was about finality. There's nothing left to fix, I said coldly. I don't trust you anymore, and without trust, there's no marriage. I'm done. Samantha broke down then. She started crying, begging, trying to explain how she'd felt trapped in the marriage, how the affair was her way of feeling alive again. But none of it mattered. Her words felt hollow, like some tired script I'd heard in a dozen other stories. It was a cliché, a last-ditch effort to manipulate me into staying. But I wasn't buying it. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her sobbing on the bed, and started packing my things. It felt surreal, like I was moving through a dream. As I folded shirts into a suitcase, I watched my life fall apart piece by piece, but I felt oddly calm. There was no more yelling, no more fighting. It was done. The revenge had been satisfying in the moment, but as the dust settled, all I felt was emptiness. After that night, I cut off contact with both Samantha and Olivia. I wasn't interested in hearing more apologies, explanations, or excuses. As far as I was concerned, they were both out of my life for good. Samantha, for obvious reasons, and Olivia? Well, she'd played her role, but she had crossed a line, and there was no going back from that. The divorce process was brutal, but at least it was quick. Samantha tried to fight it at first, but when she realized there was no saving us, she finally relented. We split everything down the middle. I didn't care about the house or the money, I just wanted out. Each meeting with her lawyer felt like peeling off layers of my old life, stripping it all away until there was nothing left but the bare essentials of who I used to be. In the end, we signed the papers, and just like that, it was over. You'd think I would have felt victorious, wouldn't you? After all, I had put my plan into motion, gotten my revenge, exposed Samantha for the liar she was, and walked away without looking back. But the truth? I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel like I'd won. I just felt empty. All the anger and hate I'd carried for so long had burned itself out, leaving nothing behind but a hollow ache. Sure, the revenge had been sweet in the moment, but it didn't fill the void her betrayal had left behind. It didn't erase the pain or the sense of loss. The years we had spent together, the trust we had built, it was all gone, and nothing I did could ever bring it back. In the days that followed, I spent a lot of time reflecting on our marriage, on how everything had unraveled, and on how I had let myself get to this point. I used to love Samantha, and maybe some small part of me still did. But that love had been warped by all the lies and secrets. I wasn't the same man I had been when we first got married, and she wasn't the same woman. Now, standing on the other side of it all, I realized the only way forward was to let go. Not just of her, but of everything. The anger, the pain, the bitterness. It was all weighing me down, and I needed to set it aside if I ever wanted to move on. Holding on to it wasn't doing me any favors. It was only dragging me deeper into a hole I didn't want to be in anymore. So I did. I walked away from that chapter of my life, leaving Samantha and all the baggage behind. It wasn't easy and it wasn't clean, but it was necessary. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my life again. I felt free. But even as I started to rebuild, the question lingered. Was it all worth it? That, I think, is a question I'll be asking myself for the rest of my life. Once the dust had settled and the divorce papers were signed, I found myself sitting across from James at a bar, looking back on the insanity of the past few months. We clinked our beers together, laughing at how ridiculous it all seemed now that it was over. James shook his head, still in disbelief. Man, I can't believe you really pulled it off. You made her pay. I chuckled, though it felt a little hollow. Sure, there was some satisfaction in it. Samantha had gotten what she deserved, and she'd been exposed for the liar she was. But the truth? The revenge hadn't left me feeling the way I thought it would. It wasn't the triumphant victory I'd envisioned. Still, we laughed over the absurdity of it all, like it was a wild story that had happened to someone else. So, what's next for you? James asked, leaning back in his chair, watching me. That question hung in the air. For the first time, I realized I didn't have an answer. I'd spent so much time focused on Samantha's lies and plotting my revenge that I hadn't thought much about what came after. The only thing I knew for certain was that I wasn't looking for another relationship anytime soon. The idea of getting involved with someone else made my stomach turn. I think it's just me for a while, I said, taking a sip of my beer.
No relationships, no drama.
I need to figure things out on my own. James nodded, his expression serious for once. Makes sense, man. After everything, you deserve some peace. That word peace stuck with me. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't tied to someone else's lies or drama. I was free to focus on myself, and honestly, that was a relief. I didn't need to chase after happiness through someone else. I needed to find it within myself. In the months that followed, I threw myself into work. My career became my distraction and my focus, and it was exactly what I needed. I started hitting the gym regularly, picked up hobbies I hadn't touched in years, and slowly began to rediscover who I was outside of my marriage. It was strange, realizing how much of my identity had been tied to Samantha and the life we had built together. Now, with her gone, it felt like I was starting over with a clean slate. The idea of starting a new relationship didn't even cross my mind. I wasn't interested. Betrayal leaves scars, and I wasn't ready to let anyone get close enough to hurt me again. Trust was something I didn't have much of anymore, not after what Samantha had done. And honestly, I wasn't in any rush to rebuild it. For the first time in a long time, I was content being on my own. James and I stayed close, of course. We'd still meet up and laugh about the whole situation. But there was an unspoken understanding between us. I was different now. I had changed. The man who had once trusted so easily, who loved without hesitation, was gone. In his place was someone more cautious, more guarded. And while that might sound sad, it wasn't. It felt like survival, like I was finally protecting myself from the kind of pain Samantha had inflicted on me. As for Samantha, she faded into the background of my life. Once the divorce was finalized, I cut her off completely. No contact, no updates, nothing. In my mind, she was just a closed chapter, something I didn't need to revisit. I didn't care what she was doing or who she was with, and I wasn't interested in hearing from her ever again. The same went for Olivia. While I had manipulated her into being part of my plan, I didn't want her in my life anymore. I wanted to leave that entire mess behind. The truth is, revenge had felt satisfying in the moment, but it didn't fill the void Samantha's betrayal had left behind. It didn't heal the wounds or restore the trust that had been shattered. What it did do was bring closure, an end to something that had dragged on far too long. It wasn't the triumphant victory I had once imagined, but it was necessary to move forward. In the months that followed, I found peace in the simple, quiet moments, the everyday things I had once overlooked. Going to work, hitting the gym, picking up my guitar, running. It was these little pieces that started to rebuild me. Slowly, I began to realize I didn't need Samantha or anyone else to define who I was. I could find happiness and strength on my own terms. That's the real lesson I took from all of this. Betrayal, trust, revenge. It's messy, painful, and complicated, but it taught me something important. I didn't need someone else to complete me. I didn't need to rebuild what had been broken. All I needed was to keep moving forward, to focus on my own life, and to find peace within myself. And for the first time in a long time, I had that peace. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more drama. Just me, my work, my life. And honestly, that was enough.